So, everyone, thank you for coming in online. We have Erin Leslie with us, our lawyer partner at Chestermere Law. Uh, we were all together a couple weeks ago in Calgary. Had a great meeting with Erin and her team, and we came up with the idea, hey, we should do a webinar telling people what they need to do on closing so they're not scrambling and closing because there are some certain things that are different in Alberta than Ontario, and it just takes some planning to deal with those. But once you have those items checked off your list, then you're good to go for closing, and it just saves everyone time and hassle, and it makes it a much smoother transition for them. So, Erin, why don't you start off and give a little background on yourself and Chestermere Law and how long you've been in the business?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Like he mentioned, my name's Erin Leslie. I've been a lawyer for over 10 years now. I started my career at a medium-sized firm. We represented about 60 or 70 different developers at the time. I moved over to open my own office 8 years ago, and we were doing primarily real estate. And then the last 3-4 years, we really got into the pre-construction world. We've closed well over 1,000 transactions in the last few years for pre-construction properties, and about 3 or 4 times that for resale properties. So that's kind of where our practice has led us to. We do a lot of real estate, and so we're very familiar with the process.
And I'll add in as well, and I think it's key. Like as Erin said, she's done over 1,000 pre-construction closings, and those are different than a resale closing, and relationships matter in those cases as well. And I can tell people that really does make a difference. And Erin has those relationships with the builders, lawyers. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. Not saying that, but it does help when they have those relationships to help smooth over some bumps in the road and everything like that. So how we're going to handle this, we're going to treat it as I'm going to treat it as an interview with Laura. It's my wife. An interview with Erin, and we're going to answer off a whole bunch of generalized questions. Then we're going to open up to the floor, and you guys can answer your questions as well. There's a Q&A box at the bottom. And as you all know, we have Nisha and Kyle here as well. And we've all closed properties. Actually, Kyle, you haven't closed a property yet in Calgary.
I haven't closed a property, but I still used Erin for purchase of one as well.
Yes. Yeah. Kyle's purchase. Yes. Kyle's purchase. Kyle's still waiting for his first closing. His first closing will be in 2025. I've closed and sold in Calgary. Nisha's closed. We've all used for our transactions. So we will also add our flavor to it and our experiences as well. So first off, Erin, just looking at the pre-list that you sent me, thank you for that. Now, of course, I've closed it on my screen, so now I have to reopen it. Give me 1 second. There we go. So when you're working with someone, or what's your advice for someone, how can they be proactive with their purchase prior to their final closing?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is there are certain developers out there that don't require a pre-approval, especially if you have a project that's 5-6 years out. It's extremely important, even if it's not required, to still get a pre-approval. You want to have a chat with a mortgage broker. You want to have a chat with your specialist at your bank and see where you need to be at from a financial perspective when it comes to closing time. We all think, but you don't necessarily want to be entering into a large purchase like this unless you know for sure it's going to be something that's going to be feasible for you. So I always recommend that people have a chat with a mortgage broker. Also, if they're making any big financial changes in between now and the closing date, if they change jobs, if they buy a new house, if they buy a new car, anything like that, those are conversations that you need to go back and have with your mortgage broker and say, hey, remember that property I bought a year ago? Is this going to affect my ability? Closing's coming up in a couple of years. Is it going to affect my ability to close, right? So you have those constant conversations with everybody on your team. your realtor, your lawyer, your mortgage broker, right? Everybody should be involved in the entire process. That's why it's a great idea to have your contract originally reviewed by a lawyer. And then you kind of have that relationship on the go forward from the start of your purchase investment, or if you're going to be moving into the property, from the start of your purchase all the way up until closing. So that's really, really important. You know, you don't want to be the person that buys this and doesn't think about it again until you get your 30-day notice of possession. Then it's a mad scramble. Another big thing is you want to definitely follow up with the developer on construction updates. Now, some developers will provide you with those. They'll send you periodic emails. They'll have a website where it shows kind of their projects and how long, but you want to have a mental note. Okay, is this an 18-month build? Is it a month build? How long is it going to take? So then you kind of have it in your head. Okay, well, they broke ground May 2024. It's a 2-year build. It's probably going to be a, you know, spring 2026 possession. So then you just constantly wait until you get the possession notification, okay? Because in Alberta, in almost every contract that you see, it does state that they only have to give you 30 days or sometimes 35 days notice of a possession. And with mortgages and how long it's taking now, that's just way too tight of a timeline for you to be starting the process to get your final approvals and everything in order. So super, super important you stay on top of your purchase. It's a large purchase, you know, and really important that you have an idea of the timelines all throughout the process.
So, Erin, you're cutting.
I typically tell people.
Oh, Erin, you're cutting out on your audio a little bit. Might be your bandwidth connection. Maybe try turning off your video and see if that gets better.
Okay. Sure. Can you hear me better now?
Try talking a little bit. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. So another big thing that I always recommend is once you have perfect. Okay. You don't have to see me. All right. So once you have that mental note and okay, you're thinking, all right, it's likely going to be spring. The developer might not tell you that you're 90 or 120 days out. Some do, some don't. So it's really important that you just kind of make that assumption on your own based on how the project is coming along and start your mortgage approval process early. I usually recommend 3 or 4 months before closing, engaging with your broker, engaging with your banker, and getting all of the documents over to them so you have that final approval. And a lot of people will say to me, well, I didn't have the actual closing date, so I couldn't. Well, no, they don't need an actual closing date to provide you with a final approval. They can go through the entire process prior to, and then once you get the possession notification from the developer, you can send that over to your mortgage broker and they can update their system, but then they already have your approval ready to go and everything good to be sent to your lawyer. So you also want to let the developer know early who's going to be representing you for a lawyer. Not all real estate lawyers are the same. I'm not sure if this is similar in Ontario, but in Alberta, just because you practice real estate doesn't mean that you do pre-construction, doesn't mean that you have, you know, experience with developers or anything like that. It is a different process, as Alex mentioned at the beginning. So I strongly recommend that you know, interview lawyers and make sure you are aware if they have any experience in these areas and, you know, they know how to close these transactions. That's really important.
Yeah, and that's again what we're at, where experience and relationships matter. Just because a lawyer says, "Hey, maybe we'll try to do this," you know, Erin has the experience of working with these lawyers to know that, well, this isn't going to fly. So you're not wasting your time with someone saying you can go down a certain route. It's not going to happen, and you're just chasing a rabbit and wasting valuable time. She knows exactly what way a builder will move and what way a builder won't. Some builders will allow extension of timelines. Some builders are very firm on this is the closing date, and if you don't close on this closing date. So it's important to have a lawyer you're working with that knows the ins and outs of the builder partners they're working with and the legal representation on the other side, so they can know what can be done and what can't be done. because she's done these transactions before. That's where experience and relationships definitely matter. And Erin, I like how you brought up, and Nisha's been down this road before as well with some clients, just when you talk about mortgages. And when you come up into the year of closing on a property, it's not a time that you want to be taking a sabbatical from work, or buying another property right before you close on this property, or as Erin brought up, making other major purchases and which are going to impact your credit. Like, let's buy a luxury vehicle and put a huge lease payment on it. These things are going to impact your ability to get a mortgage and create new stress. Hey, guess what? You can do all that right after you close. Just close on your property first before you do those things, and it will alleviate a ton of stress. And we've all been there, myself, Kyle, Nish, Erin, where we've seen clients do these kinds of things, and it's created very, very, very stressful circumstances. And what I recommend is, when you're coming up to the year of something closing, what Erin brought up again, getting that, speaking with the bank, look at it January 1st when, okay, 2024, I have closings coming up. Let's get that process started. Again, you don't need the exact closing date to close on a property. You just have to get the process started, and that approval can be pushed forward. And then when you have that firm time frame, move it forward. And I will say, in Alberta, they're very generous on their notice they give. Kyle and I, we had a closing in Toronto where legally they have to give us 21 days. And I swear it was less than 21 days, wasn't it, Kyle?
I think it was exactly 21 days.
21
days. I
days.
ran into the exact issue that we're talking about here. I did not have enough time for the bank to actually close the mortgage. So I had to close it in cash and then refinance it and get the mortgage afterwards, because I thought it was going to be a much, much longer closing. The previous phase took 2 years to close.
Kyle, they told you it was going to be a much longer closing. Not even thought they actually said, and then they gave.
So learn from my experience. Get that mortgage pre-approval as far out as you can. Really, you cannot do it too early. You just might need to refresh it again, but at least you have it on file and you're working with a good broker. And similar to working with a really good experienced real estate agent, or not real estate, real estate lawyer being critical to closing your transaction, you need a really good mortgage broker as well that can finance pre-construction properties, that knows how to do that and can do it out in Alberta as well. And we work with some fantastic mortgage partners that we can refer to you that do this every single day as well. So if you need a referral, definitely reach out to us and we can help you with that as well.
And I want to clarify when we say close in cash, because in that circumstance, I had to close in cash as well. When we say the idea of closing in cash, doesn't actually mean you have physical cash. It means you have physical liquidity. So what that means is, not everyone is in this situation. Absolutely not everyone. But let's say you had a property, your principal residence, for example, and you had a home equity line of credit on that property. You could use that home equity line of credit to then close that property, and then put a mortgage on the property after closing. So that's the idea of when you talk about closing cash. It's not actually that cash is sitting in the bank account. What it means is that you have the liquidity to close and meet the obligation that's in the contract to provide those funds to the builder. And I will say, if you do that situation, and it's not a bad situation to do. And I've done it a number of times in the past where I've closed with a home equity line of credit on my principal residence. What that has allowed me to do then is really shop around for rates and not have that stressful closing date. But again, make sure you have that liquidity in place. We can't see Erin's face right now, but I do know in point she's going to say, like, don't be shopping around for rates for under 30 days. No, don't do that. If you make sure you have the cash to close if you were doing that kind of situation. But it's a very, very, very important. So continuing on, that's just getting yourself ready for closing. So now let's say you've been given notice. Now we're at the 30 days prior to possession. Erin, what do you recommend people, they're in that 30-day window to closing? What should they be doing?
Okay, so once you get that possession notification, and you're correct, there are some developers that even though they're only required to give the 30 days, they will give 60 or 90 days. But once you're at that 30 day, or a month before closing, you should have your final approval with your lender. It is not a time to be rate shopping. I know a month seems like a long time, but it's not. There's a process once you have your approval for the mortgage departments to send instructions over to your lawyer. I get this all the time. A broker will say, yeah, you have instructions, they've been sent. It still takes 2 to 3 business days to come to me before the broker, it's released from the broker from the direct funding department. So really important, that you have that final approval, you're ready to go, and you're not rate shopping at that point. Confirm that your lawyer has your mortgage broker's information so they can follow up directly with your broker if they don't have instructions yet. So they should be communicating between the two of them. Hey, I have instructions. Hey, I don't. And it doesn't hurt for you to be proactive in the process as well, and just say, hey, where are we looking? Do you have everything that you need? I'll follow up with my broker as well, and we'll get those instructions sent over to you so you're ready to go. So what happens, within those 30 days is we are not only waiting on a package of documents from your lender, but we're also getting a package of documents from the developer's lawyer. So we aren't able to prepare your package. A lot of times people ask us, how can I send my money? Can I get the money sent over to you? What's the amount that I need to send to you? Until we have those two pieces, the package of documents from the developer's lawyer and the package of documents from your lender, we don't have all of the information to provide you with those final numbers. So you just need to kind of sit tight on the exact amount to send, and all that will come once we prepare your file for signatures, okay? We'll review everything sent from the developer's lawyer, see what their requirements are. Every developer has different requirements. Sometimes there's documents that they need signed that others don't. And so we just need to make sure that we have both before we prepare your file, okay? And so that's when your lawyer and your broker should be doing everything in the background. And, you should just be hanging tight to hear from them when you're ready to go for your signing appointment.
One very quick thing that I'd love to add to what Erin indicated during that 30-day process, very critical. Like, I know we've said this, but it warrants a reinforcement of the fact that don't shop around. We've had clients that have lost their construction properties, and I'm not doing this to instill fear, but to be clearly accurate in what the outcomes can be. You can lose your property and lose your deposit if you try to shop around and miss your closing. You have significant fines that you might have to pay. So pretty much do all these things well in advance. You're not dealing with these huge headaches as you get closer towards your possession date.
And we'll go, Erin, have you seen people lose their deposits and lose their property because of this?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and we've seen this as well. So we're not, again, as Nish said, we're not trying to scare people. We're just telling people that this is what can happen. So the idea of trying to save 0.25% on your mortgage versus losing tens to hundred, I want to say hundreds, but over $100,000 is realistic. That has happened. We've seen that happen. So just you can always do things after the fact, because then you have control over the situation. But what you want to do is close on that date. Guys, we're talking about a situation that happens 1% of the time. So again, we're not trying to scare everyone. Yeah. We're just trying, like, this is the thing not to do. So just avoid that, close. And what I tell people when I get a mortgage is I just want to go to the bank that's going to give me the money. That's my rationale. I can rate shop when I have the flexibility to rate shop when I don't have a hard deadline. But in regards to when I have a hard deadline, I want the bank that's going to give me the money with the least amount of stress. That's what I do. So it's always good to, again, use a great mortgage broker that has experience. use someone that you have a relationship with in regards, like, hey, I'll back it. If your bank is going to give you the money right off the bat, then that's great. Or then use the mortgage broker that's experienced. You don't want to just walk into a branch on Yonge Street and go, hey, I need a mortgage for this Calgary property that's closing in 2 weeks, because you're not going to get it. I'll tell you that. So, but again, we have the partners to introduce you for that, and that's why we keep on reiterating that to everyone here. Okay, so
yeah, and one more thing to add, Alex, often
Al.
a condition of getting a mortgage is home insurance as well. So
Mm-hmm.
during this 30 or 90-day notice period, you also want to be shopping around to get that insurance on your property. So that's in place for closing as well.
Which, yeah, when we have that insurance contact for everyone there, and I will say, I've been guilty of it. I forgot. And I, because I have, when I closed my first Calgary property, we tell you this all from experience, because I lived it. I have a blanket policy in Ontario. So insurance, I usually just email my broker and adds on, no big deal. Insurance is no problem for me. Closing my first Calgary property, I didn't even think of insurance. I'm like, oh, shoot. And then on top of that, it was a house, not a condo, which is also different. So anyways, my broker could not do it. And I was scrambling. I had 2 business days to come up with the insurance. I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to get this insurance. And I ended up getting it in place. And then I also had stresses after that, because it was then a vacant property, and I was selling the property, and then the insurance canceled me because I had sold the property. Whole nother story. We're not going to get into it. But I highly recommend, and Erin put this in her notes as well, and we're going to get to it. We recommend an insurance broker that's based out of Calgary, because they have local experience in the market. Every market has their own local items. You don't, again, want to be in that situation where at the last minute you don't have that insurance coverage, because guess what? You don't have insurance coverage, you don't have a mortgage. But Erin's not going to be able to get the funds released for you, and you're scrambling at the last minute. So we do have an insurance broker that we recommend, that's on the ground there, that knows how to handle these items. So great point, Kyle. We try to line up all the contacts for you to make this as easy as possible for everyone. So continuing on, so now we're 7 to 14. We're past that 30-day mark. We're getting closer to closing. We're 7 to 14 days prior to possession. Erin, what should I be doing now?
All right, so 7 to 14 days out, your signing appointment should be booked, okay? Now, in Alberta, we cannot electronically sign closing documents. It is confusing because they allow it for contracts, but unfortunately, when it comes to those closing documents that are going down to land titles, Alberta Land Titles does not allow electronic signatures, okay? So you should have a Zoom meeting if you're not planning on coming to Calgary. What I should mention, just I'll go back quickly on that. If you're planning to come here for your possession, don't plan to be here to sign, plan to be here for the actual walkthrough of your possession. It's more important for you to physically see the property, walk through the property if you're going to be doing that, than it is for you to be signing. So typically, for all of our out of province clients, we're booking Zoom meetings to complete the signing. So we will send you a very large package. Everybody is always surprised with how many papers are in this package. They range anywhere from a cash transaction where it's about 50 pages for a certain trust company mortgage where it can be up to 250 pages per purchase. Okay, so it's a large package of documents. So be prepared. If you have the ability to print them on a commercial printer, I highly recommend it, or you're going to pay about $300 in refills for your home printer to print this package of documents. So we will send you the package via email. You print everything out single-sided prior to the Zoom meeting. And then we have a Zoom and we physically witness you sign the documents. After that Zoom meeting, you need to courier those original documents back. Depending on how close we are to closing, I always recommend overnight couriering those documents to us. Our biggest success is with Purolator and FedEx. They can usually do overnight from most places in Ontario and BC. So we typically recommend those. I know, with Canada Post, and I'm not bashing any sort of courier service. So if you work for them, please don't come at me. It's just our experience. Canada Post has the express post, but in our experience, it still takes 3 to 4 business days. And And UPS, unfortunately, I don't know if it's just where our office is located, but they tend to deliver outside of office hours, so it makes it problematic. So we typically recommend Purolator or FedEx for those packages to come. And we need to be, like, another thing I should mention is for new condos, we need those original documents at least 3 to 4 business days prior to closing. Reason being is in Alberta, if we are closing on a new condo, the condo has to be registered in your name prior to closing. That means we send the documents down to land titles and get it registered before we even close on the transaction. So on the closing date, for us to use the mortgage funds to be able to use your money, we need to have it registered in your name. So in order to ensure that you're not going to be subject to late interest or anything like that, you want to make sure that those documents are with the lawyer in sufficient time to get the registration. So super important on that. If it is a new condo, we explain that to each of our clients. Before your signing meeting, you'll get an email with a copy of all of the documents, instructions on how the documents need to be printed out, instructions on how to get insurance. There is specific insurance that needs, or specific information that needs to be on your insurance binder if you're getting a mortgage. So it has to show first loss payee. There's certain developers that want to show that there's condominium deductible insurance and stuff like that. So every single property that you purchase will have different requirements on what needs to be on those insurance binders. All that information is going to be in that email. Okay. So if we're meeting 7 to 14 days before your closing, you'll have sufficient time, 3-4 days to get that insurance package together while everything's being sent to us, because we just need the insurance binder emailed over to us. But while everything else, the originals are being sent to us, you have some time in there to get your insurance in place. Okay, but there is specific information that needs to be on there. But again, like Alex mentioned, if you want to start that process earlier, I think that was Kyle that mentioned that story. If you want to start that process early, you can just have your insurance in place. And then when we send the email with the exact information that you need, then you call your broker and you say, okay, I just got this email from my lawyer. This is what I need changed. Then at least it's just a change. It's not starting the policy from scratch, right? Because there's a lot of information you have to provide sometimes. So it's good to kind of have that all ready to go.
And I'll add with insurance and again, it's good you work with a broker that's educated and that can respond quickly. I've been there. So for the what we're talking about when Erin talks about lost payee, that kind of thing. So let's say you're getting a mortgage on the property. Let's say it's CIBC, for example. What they'll want is naming CIBC, but then they also want an exact address on there. So if that address doesn't match up correctly, it doesn't work. And then you have to get that and what I mean, the actual address for CIBC, and that address can change sometimes. And there's a specific address that CIBC wants on there for the lost payee. But if you have a broker that can respond quickly and knows how to do these things, basically you just send an email to them, hey, I need the lost payee name change, or I need the lost payee address change, quick change to the PDF. They send that back over. But you want someone with experience that you can reach out quickly to get those changes made. I'll also say with insurance, when you reach out for the policy, you're going to get a lot of annoying questions that aren't relevant. Don't get frustrated. We all get those questions. It's just sometimes you'll get questions going, how is this even relevant? It's not relevant. It's just systems that insurance brokers use that are outdated, I would say. So again, don't get frustrated. Don't get you may get overwhelmed with the questions. Just sit back, grab a glass of water, sit back down, just go, is this question relevant or not? So I'll give an example. In a new build condo, is it aluminum or copper wiring? I'll let you know it's copper wiring. It's not aluminum wiring because they don't use aluminum anymore. But you may get that question. Just letting people know, don't get frustrated. It's just the insurance process.
And Erin, in Ontario, I think we're signing 3 copies of the contract. How many copies or versions of the paperwork is required in Alberta?
So it depends on the document. So with a mortgage, we execute 4 copies of the mortgage. So everybody has an original, but that's just the mortgage document. The rest of the documents are typically in duplicate, sometimes triplicate. But what we do is we send the whole package with the amount of copies that we need, all as one scan. So a client just needs to go into the scan and print as is, and it'll print the amount of copies. It's not, okay, this document's 4, this document's 3. That's just, difficult from a printing perspective. It's, hey, here's the attachment, print this entire thing single-sided.
So I'll also get key thing. Remember, hear that single-sided, everyone, because that's happened. It hasn't been single-sided. Also, it is going to be like 100 pages. We've all been there again. So make sure your printer works and your printer has adequate ink. Because that also has happened before as well. For those wet signatures, so those rigid documents. I'll also add that a great place is if you're like, where am I going to get the ship from? I've always just went to Staples Business Depot, and they have Purolator shipping at Staples. So if you're wondering where can I go ship it, just in your head, if you know where your local Staples is, just double check they have shipping capabilities there. I've just always went to Staples and got my things shipped. So continuing on.
Yeah, so during your 7 to 14 days, you also want to be setting up your utilities. Okay, so depending on the type of property, if it's a single family, then you need to set up all your utilities. If it's a condo, you need to make sure which utilities are not included under the condo fees and be setting up those utilities, because we now have developers that are requesting proof that utilities have been set up by clients. So your lawyer might ask you for proof that you've signed up for NMAX, Direct Energy. If you need a list of the utility providers in Alberta that we typically use, we can send that over to you. For power and natural gas, it's typically NMAX or Direct Energy, and that's typically who we're using. And then for water and sewer, it depends what municipality that you're in and stuff like that. But we can definitely assist with that, but you're going to want to be setting up those utilities and sending the confirmations over to your lawyer so they have everything that we need. And you're going to be wanting to wire transfer the closing funds. So why we have to do wire transfers, we get a lot of the times where people will say, oh, I know you sent me wiring instructions, but we just went and got a bank draft and deposited into your account. Please do not do that. Unfortunately, now most of the banks, if it is a bank draft from another institution, they will put a hold on those funds, typically until after the closing date. So we cannot use those funds. So yes, it is cheaper for you to go get a bank draft and deposit it, but unfortunately, those funds are held. It is mandatory that those funds be sent by wire transfer or, account to account transfer if you're at the same bank that your lawyer has a trust account, but don't go deposit a bank draft from another institution into that trust account, or there will be problems. So we are very explicit about that. Unfortunately, we do still get clients that will deposit a bank draft and then we have to deal with it, but make sure that those funds are wired. Okay.
Good to know. That is a great tidbit. See, we learn things when we sit on these calls too, because I would have just done bank drafts. So good to know.
Yeah.
Which is really
a huge
how
difference. Yeah. And that's a huge difference from how developers accept the deposits, because normally it's just proof of deposit. They don't actually need the funds on specific days. So very different in the closing transaction.
Yeah, because even if they're fund from their perspective, they're like, well, it's in our account, so we're fine. And if in 5 to 10 days the funds are returned or whatever the case may be, then we can deal with that as a default pursuant to the purchase agreement. So we're still fine. For us, we need that money on the closing date. We have to transfer funds. That's how you get possession. That's how you become the owner of the property. So if the funds aren't available, we can't transfer them and our hands are tied. So yeah, that's a really important one.
Which is really counterintuitive to what the resale market looks like, because with many resale properties, the brokerages are asking you to do a bank draft so they can see that it's in their account right away. So for those that are used to that process, the wire transfer may seem like it takes a little longer, but in this case, it is the fastest and most efficient way to get that money into your lawyer's account.
So should we move on to possession date?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So now it's date of closing. What am I doing, Erin?
So on the day of closing, what's going to happen is once your lawyer's office opens, they go and they check their trust accounts and they see what money has come in overnight or first thing in the morning. So we don't receive mortgage funds until the day of closing. Now, a major difference between Ontario and Alberta is we only have until noon to close. So if we don't have funds in our account for any of the mortgages that we're supposed to fund that day, we get on the phone and we are calling the bank, calling the bank, calling the bank. As soon as those funds hit our trust account, then we cut a check and we physically go and deposit it into the developer's lawyer's account. Okay. Once they receive that check, which is a mixture of the cash to close that you've wired to us and your mortgage funds, then that is the amount that they need to close the transaction, and they will call and release keys. So all of that has to be done before noon on a closing date. And then what you're going to want to check is on your possession notification, there will be a time that either you or your representative, whoever you have appointed to complete the walkthrough for you, or if that's going to be a property manager or whatever, they will need to attend the property for you to complete the walkthrough. And there's a form called a certificate of possession that gets signed on the day of possession, and that will note if there's any sort of deficiencies on the property, if there's paint touch-ups that need to be done, if there's a lighting fixture that hasn't been installed. Those are all very common things that can happen at closing. That'll note any deficiencies, and that'll indicate when those deficiencies are going to be rectified by.
And I saw okay, so we got our closing. I started looking at questions, so I'm thrown off now. Okay, so now it's after closing, closed on the property. When do I get title of the property?
Okay, so it depends again if it's going to be a new condo or if it's a single family home. So Alberta Land Titles was way behind last year. We were about 4 or 5 months behind. So we weren't actually getting physical titles in client's name until 4 or 5 months after closings. Okay, they've sped up. I think they're about 3 or 4 weeks right now. So if it is a single family home or anything, or a townhouse that does not have condo fees, if it's not a condo, it will be registered in your name about a month after closing. Okay. There also will be mortgages for the developer that need to be discharged, and that'll happen after closing. Once we have everything back, we will send a final report out to a client. If you need anything before your final report is sent, reach out to us at any time. We can send you the document. Sometimes people will need the title that shows that the property's in their name. We can send that instantly over to them. If it is a new condo, it's already registered in your name, so the title is registered, so you will get your reporting package a little bit earlier.
Great. Now let's go over noteworthy items. I do love the number one, talking about closing costs, because I love the closing costs in Alberta. I'm sure people in Alberta don't say the same thing, but they don't pay our Ontario closing costs. So what closing costs then? Well, I'll let you go over the points, Erin, but just why don't you start with closing costs and go over all your other points, just in regards to other items people should know about.
Yeah, so in terms of closing costs, we don't have development charges in Alberta. So there's nothing that's going to be outside of the agreement that all of a sudden there's going to be an unknown number that you're charged at closing. So you will be charged your legal fees and disbursements, whatever legal fees you've negotiated with your lawyer. They've indicated is going to be their closing amount to complete the closing. Disbursements vary based on the purchase price and mortgage amount. So Alberta Land Titles, while we don't have land transfer tax, we do have land titles fees. Typically right now, those range anywhere for a transfer for $200 to $400-$500, depending on the purchase price. And for your mortgage amount, it would be another $200 to $400-$500. Okay.
You're making Kyle laugh on how low that is.
Yeah, those are hundred, not thousands.
such a low amount, right? So, I mean, our accounts are generally $1,700 to $2,000 right now for your legal fees, your disbursements, your GST. All right. Now, I should mention the Alberta government just announced that they are likely going to be increasing those fees. They have thrown out a number yet, but nothing has been confirmed, and we don't know when that's going to happen. But it's not going to be into the thousands. It's going to be a few more $100s on a transaction. So we can get, once we have more information, then we can update kind of all of our referral sources and our partners, so you guys are aware of how that's going to affect clients' accounts. But again, it's going to be a few more $100, not a few $1,000s. And there's no land transfer tax in the talk or anything like that. Other things that you need to be aware of: property tax adjustments. Now, typically with these new builds, property taxes haven't been assessed. But if they've been assessed, your supplemental is essentially for the building portion of the property, then it could be, where you're paying, if you're closing in, let's say, July, property taxes are due typically at the end of June. If we're talking about the city of Calgary, when you pay at the end of June, you're paying for the first 6 months of the year and the last 6 months of the year. So that June 30th payment, if you close on July 2nd, then you may be responsible for 6 months of property taxes that you have to pay the developer back. So that could be, a couple $1,000s, depending on the property, that it would be adjusted on the statement of adjustment. And that could be an amount that you necessarily weren't expecting at closing. So that's something I always point out. But typically with the new builds, it's not a large adjustment because they haven't completed that supplemental yet. So it would just be the land portion that would be adjusted at closing. Okay. Supplemental would come later, and then there would be an agreement between you and the developer that they're responsible for the property taxes before the closing date, and you're responsible for the property taxes after you've closed on the transaction. Okay. Title insurance. Now, I know in Ontario, you guys do title insurance on almost every single transaction, if not every single transaction. In Alberta, it really depends. So if the lender requires it, if it's not a major 5 bank, they will likely require a title insurance policy. Then we'll order it. If the client requests it, we'll order it. But if they do not, we do not order title insurance. And that amount can range. If it's going to be one of the major banks or a trust company, they're usually a couple $100. If it can be a private lender, those can, definitely increase quite a bit. We see title insurance policies sometimes being, $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the private lender. So that's another amount that you need to be prepared for, depending on which lender you're going to be proceeding with. Okay.
So I'll ask a quick question on that, because it's been brought up recently in Ontario, because we've had some mortgage fraud in Ontario. Let's say someone was closing in a cash transaction. So in that case, a lender isn't green lighting title insurance, so there wouldn't be title insurance automatically added to the policy. What's happening in Ontario is that people are, through fraudulent means, putting fraudulent mortgages. So basically, if the property doesn't have a mortgage, they'll go to CIBC, have fraudulent documents, and then put a mortgage on the property, and someone doesn't know until they get this letter from the bank saying, hey, you're behind on your mortgage payments. You're like, I don't have a mortgage on the property. Have you seen that in Alberta at all? Because I know different land registry systems have different protections in place.
So we have not seen that in Alberta. Like, I personally haven't seen that, where I have seen where properties have been transferred out of people's names or things have been registered incorrectly. Mm-hmm. If you are not in the province and you're not going to be physically living in a property, I think if you're ever paying cash and there isn't a mortgage, it is a very good idea to have a title insurance policy. Yeah. It's going to cost you a couple $100, and it's worth it.
So yeah, I just want to add that to everyone on there. Just if you're planning to close all cash, to put that extra protection, because you don't want someone taking your asset, or as Erin said, like someone transferring it to their name through fraudulent means, and you don't even know. And then one day you're like, hey, where's my property? And it's gone because it's gone through fraudulent means again. The likelihood of that, incredibly low. But again, as Erin said, you're not there. So you might as well put that for a couple $100, you're fully protected.
Yeah, agreed. Another thing to watch for in terms of closing costs, some developers charge the new home warranty policy premium back to the client. You don't typically see this, but some developers do. The charges can be anywhere from $600 to $1,000. It will be in the agreement if you're going to be responsible for that fee. So again, just make sure that you've had your agreement reviewed by a lawyer, or if you haven't and you're coming up to closing time, clarifying with the lawyer if you're going to be responsible for that. So then you just kind of have a mental note of what amount you're going to need for closing. And then last thing, I think this is pretty novel to Alberta. I don't believe Ontario does this, but we have homeowner association fees. Do you guys do homeowners association fees?
No, we
Okay.
don't. Yeah, I'm familiar with them in Alberta. Yeah, but no, we don't have them here.
Yeah, so it's not a massive amount of money, but something to be aware of. So new communities in Calgary and surrounding areas, and I believe Edmonton is doing it now as well, they will have homeowner associations and they will charge a fee to every homeowner in that community. If it's a lake community, the fees are more. Usually you'll see about $500 to $600 for the year. If it's not a lake community, then it's, maybe $100 to $300 for the year. What does that money go towards? Maintenance of trees, entryway monuments, Christmas lights, basically everything to keep the community pretty. And sometimes the community will have a community center, or they'll have a park, and that money will go towards maintenance towards that. So it's a mandatory fee. It's registered on title. Everybody in the community has to pay it. It's not for every community, but typically it's for kind of the suburb communities in Calgary. So if you aren't aware, or if you don't know if you're going to be charged homeowners association fees, you can check with the lawyer and they can check on the title and they'll let you know.
And Erin, this is irrespective if it's a condo corporation that you're buying into or a freehold property. It can apply across both.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that in those circumstances, condo owners pay a little less than single family homes would pay as a yearly amount. But yes, you still are required to pay the fee if you're living in that community. For Mahogany, for example, Dawson's Landing.
No, Mahogany, I bought a Mahogany. I paid the homeowner fee. Now that, again, to people, that's something, if you're renting it out, you can pass that off to your tenants potentially, for them, because they're the ones actually living in the community, and it doesn't have any impact on your resale value either. I would say if it's a well-run community, it's actually going to add to the value of the property, because that money's going right back into the community.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'll let you keep on going through it, because there's one in there that's really, really important. I'll let you keep on going through that list there, but I'm excited for the corporation answer you're going to give.
Okay. Next piece that is very noteworthy is any change to a contract is considered an assignment. Now, we have this all the time where, the purchase was made in just one person's name. Now we need to add a spouse, or now we need to add a child, or whatever the case may be for mortgage approval process. That change, even removing a name, if the title or if the purchase agreement is in both clients' names and you need to remove a name, that is considered an assignment, and you need to obtain consent before you proceed. So it's really, really important before you buy a place, you figure out who needs to be on here for mortgage approval purposes. Does it, if there's a spouse that's not working, that might hinder your application to have them on the purchase agreement. So if you know that up front, then you can have it in the proper name, from the beginning. This includes if I decide that I'm going to transfer this property into my holding company for tax purposes. That is considered an assignment that requires consent from the developer. Okay. I think in Alberta or in Ontario, you guys have something called direction retitle, where there can be a change last minute. This is just what I've heard from other lawyers there. We can't do that in Alberta without the consent of the developer. All changes need to go through them and need to be agreed to, okay? So if you want to transfer it into your holding company, we reach out to the developer nice and early. We don't want to be doing this because there's a lot of developers that have in there, there's no assignments permitted within 90 days. So we don't want to be doing this a week or two before closing. This is something that we should be figuring out very, very early if we want to make that change, making the request to the developer. So then we know what position that we're in and how we need to proceed. Okay.
Can I
Also,
also add for Erin?
Yep.
Time is your enemy. So the more notice you give Erin, as she emphasized right there, the more time we have, the easier things get. The less time we have, the much harder things get. So yes, as Erin said, more time, things can be done or plans can be made. Less time, things get a lot harder.
correct. Okay, and then in terms of the corporation piece, if you are going to be putting into the name of a corporation that is from another province or is a federal corporation, it needs to be extra provincially registered in Alberta. That is a mandatory requirement for land titles. They will not register a property into a corporation's name unless they are registered here. They complete a search when they are doing their registration. If it's not completed before then, it gets bounced and doesn't get registered into that corporation's name. So what happens is we can complete that extra provincial registration for you, but there is a fee associated with that. So make sure that you're having a chat with your lawyer, you find out what the fee is going to be, and you figure out if, you know, it makes sense from a financial perspective to transfer it. In my experience, it typically does because it's a, you know, a pretty small fee. We charge, I think, $800 to complete the registration. There is also, you need to have an agent for service in Alberta. That does not have to be a lawyer, but you do need to have an agent for service here. So if you want a lawyer's office to do that, then there is a yearly fee associated with that. Again, a couple $100, typically, depending on the lawyer, but just something you need to be aware of.
Great. And is there anything else we need to add on that noteworthy item list, or did we cover off everything?
I'd
I'd say let's do this. Let's talk about extensions and then we'll open the floor to questions. So because that is probably I know we handled it a little bit earlier, but I want to reiterate that. Erin, do builders give extensions?
typically, no. Some do, but you'll be paying extremely high interest. You don't get an extension where they're just going to give you an extra 2 weeks to get things together. If they do give an extension, and most don't, but if they do, then you will be paying, you know, probably $300 to $500 a day for that extension, and until you are able to close. On my idea on this is just go in that you will not have an extension, and that is your end date, and you have to be closed by that date regardless.
Yes.
You know, it's that's the best position to be in. Then you know that you are ready to go and you have everything over and you close on time. Especially when a developer gives you more than the 30 days notice. If they're getting 60, 90, 120 days notice, you know, they're not going to give you an extension because you should have had everything in order, right? So just really important, again, making sure that you have everything in order early.
Great. So let's we're going to open up the floor to questions. I think we covered that off there. Okay. Someone asking how assignments work in Alberta. And what I say to people, and Kyle says this, Nisha says, doing assignments in Alberta, it doesn't make financial sense to be doing them. You can make an argument in Ontario where it may make financial sense because you're avoiding some closing costs, but since there are no closing costs in Alberta, there is no financial sense that it makes out there. What I mean by that is it's not tax efficient to be selling on assignment. You will be, you'll take 100% of any profit into income, and there's a GST component on top of any profit as well. Plus, on top of that, there is really no assignment market in Alberta. That hasn't their market hasn't matured to that yet. So you're not really looking at a market where assignments are actively traded. So there just really isn't a market to do them out there. You always make more money buying and holding real estate. If you need to do something, you can do one of two things: close and then sell, or close and then sell in 1 year. Best case scenario is always closing and selling in 1 year if you really want to get rid of the property. Reason for that is your profit after 1 year is then taxed at a capital gain exemption rate of 50%. If you sell under a year, 100% of that profit is taken into income. That is something that's new, started in 2023. It's called the anti-flipping tax by the federal government. So there's a tax advantage on that side. On top of that, you would also be eligible for a potential GST rebate by keeping the property for a year. So some additional income you can gain that way. And then finally, the great thing about real estate in Alberta and landlord tenancy is that they're fixed term leases. So unlike in Ontario, if I put a tenant in, I don't know when a tenant will leave. Out there, I put a tenant in for 1 year. I can tell a tenant to leave at the end of 1 year, and then I have the ability to exit the transaction with a vacant property and sell it. So you're always like, and again, you better keep it longer than 1 year. But if you absolutely need to sell, you buy it, you hold it for 1 year, then sell it. The community's matured by that point, and you'll be in a much better situation. So always buy and tend to close and hold for at least 1 year if you need to sell, but you want to hold it for long. But that's my answer to on the assignment side. Oh, this is great. Please provide more details about in-term closing and occupancy fees. Erin, is there in-term closing and occupancy fees in Alberta?
It depends on the building. Typically with the 4, 5, 6-story buildings in these suburbs, you don't see interim occupancy. It's possible, but so why you get interim occupancy is they can't complete the final survey plan until the project is substantially complete, right? So with high-rise buildings, if higher floors, all of the walls and everything aren't up yet, then they can't do that final condo plan. And so that's where the lag is. They might have occupancy permits for certain units, but they don't have the full building complete where they can complete the survey. So with those lower buildings, they can complete that survey much earlier. And with Alberta Land Title speeding up their process, now we're getting registration. So most developers don't really like interim occupancy because they don't get paid on these units until they close. So, we get people that say, well, they're getting extra rent. Well, yeah, the interim occupancy fee is typically, a portion of what the condo fees would be. Instead of paying condo fees, you pay that amount. And then the interest portion of a person's mortgage payment, right? But if they're not paying a mortgage and it's a cash transaction, there might not be any sort of fees on that, right? So it's not the builder's end game to be renting these units to potential or to buyers. It's their end game to close on these and to move on to their next development. So most of the time with the 4, 5, 6-story buildings, you don't see interim occupancy, but definitely possible with the high rises that are going to be downtown Calgary because of those reasons. They can't complete that final condo plan until the entire building is complete.
And I'll add to people on here, and the reason they ask that question because they're used to occupancy fees here in Ontario, and they could, worst case scenario, go into 2 years. That's absolute worst here. So it's nothing like that in Ontario, out in Alberta, and likelihood you're not going to have any experience in those. So I thought that was a great question. Yeah. Someone asking here if they actually wanted to get title insurance because they're closing cash. How would they get the title insurance? They just request you to add that on, right?
Correct. Yeah. We can generate a quote, send it over to the client, and then they just ask us to proceed.
Okay, great. Can we sell the property just after getting it? How soon are we able to sell if we need to? Generally, you can sell right after closing, right, Erin?
Yep. Occasionally, there will be right of first refusals in contracts. It might stipulate that you need to get the consent from the developer if you want to sell for less than what you paid for it, or, so you always want to get the lawyer to check back at the provisions in the agreement that are applicable post-closing. But generally, you're free to sell right after you close.
Yeah. And the reason a builder would put that in is they're actually trying to protect everyone's investment. They don't want someone panic selling and then selling it for less and then below market value and impacting the values of everyone. So that's why you see sometimes those covering for a year period after closing, because you are better off holding for a year and you're going to make more money, and everything projects to holding for a year. Kyle, right? Niche, Kyle, hold for at least a year. If not longer, you will make more money. And you're even if you're in a negative cash flow situation, holding that negative cash flow for a year, but the appreciation you make holding it for a year period after will outweigh the negative cash flow by an exponential amount. Okay, so so is there an equivalent to Terran warranty in Calgary? How does it work? So Terran warranty is our provincial organization that does the warranty. That you do get a warranty in Alberta. They just use private corporations for their warranty coverage in Alberta. So I think, Erin, you referenced it earlier just in regards to generally the builder pays. Sometimes they offset that cost to the client, but there is warranty coverage for these new builds. Correct, Erin?
Yes, so it's mandatory of any new build in Alberta that they have to be under the warranty program, under Alberta New Home Warranties. So there's different providers, but they all have to have the minimum standard, which is the 1-year workmanship and materials, 2-year delivery and distribution system, 5-year building envelope, 10-year structural.
Okay. Just have someone, Dave's asking about a purchase in a specific building. Kyle will reach out to you directly to handle that question. The asking now a question about rental agreements. Does the builder charge you if you don't go with their rental agreement? I think they're talking about the rental guarantee, and I think that just depends on the situation that you're in. We have seen the builder charge for that. We have seen the builder not charge for that. So it just depends on the builder's discretion.
Often it depends on how much notice you're giving them as well. If you wanted to opt out of a rental guarantee on something that's closing, say in 2026, 27, you can very likely do that at no cost. If you're trying to get out of a guarantee that's starting tomorrow, you're likely going to have to pay the developer a break fee for that.
Yeah, that's been our experience. Question, in Alberta, you close first to get the keys, then you have your inspection, and only after that you get a tenant. That's the which is you don't do a pre-closing. So in Ontario we do a PDI. You're not doing a 2 weeks prior to closing a PDI out in Alberta.
Typically not. Most developers will have on the possession notice that they do the walkthrough on the possession date. There are some developers that do a walkthrough a week or so before, but most do the walkthrough on the day of possession.
Yeah. Great question.
Sorry, Alex, just one addition to that. There was another question that asked if they have to physically be there on site to do the inspection. The quick answer is no. You can have your property management company do the walkthrough for you, or someone in your proxy. You don't physically have to fly out there if you're not in the province, or if you don't want to do that yourself.
Yeah, and I'll add, Nish and I have closed properties. I've closed 2 properties, and in Calgary. Nish, what are you at for closing, Sam?
I think my 4th is within that 30-day window, Erin. But I'm on target.
And you have done no walkthroughs on the property prior to closing.
That's correct.
Yeah, there's one of have people there. We've lived this. We haven't seen our properties prior to. Actually, I haven't personally seen any of my properties. I have not walked ever in any of my properties in Calgary. This is a good question here. I think it relates just to terminology when compared to Ontario to Alberta. Is possession, closing, occupancy the same thing? Generally, yes, right, Erin? You get possession, you're closing on the property.
Yeah, generally, yes, unless you have that interim occupancy. So typically, when possession notifications go out on a project, I will reach out to the lawyer and say, are we closing on interim occupancy or is it final closing, just to confirm? And then, 90% of the time it is the final closing. So then I just notify all my clients that it's going to be your final closing. One thing that I didn't talk about early, I should bring up, I think this is different in Ontario. Whether you're closing on interim occupancy or the final closing, you still need your final approval with your lender. I've been told in Ontario, if it's interim occupancy, you don't necessarily need that. Very different in Alberta. You do not get possession unless you've signed all of your mortgage documents as if they were funding right away, and are ready to go and have your cash to close sent over. So regardless, from a mortgage perspective, you need to have everything approved and in order, just as if you were closing final closing if it's interim occupancy.
Hey, we're gonna wrap up in 5 minutes. I'm just gonna get these final questions here because I appreciate everyone for coming on online and spending time with us. So respectful of everyone's time, and Erin spending time today with us. Going here, for rental guarantee, can the builder include utilities in their lease agreement? So when you're in a rental guarantee, the builder has control. Okay. So the builder can make it that the lease, the landlord's responsible for the utilities, and then those utility costs get passed on to the landlord. We've experienced this. So if you want control over your asset, I would say you opt out of the rental guarantee. You have a strong rental market in Alberta, and that way you control the asset and you control your destiny. And then again, if it's something that you choose to sell within a year, you're not selling it with a rental guarantee in place. You can do that fixed term lease and then look at selling the asset. You also have the ability, then I see another question, just, hey, rental rates have gone up. Will the builder adjust my rental guarantee amount? No, they will not. If you just opt out of the rental guarantee, you have the ability then to rent it at market rates. We've experienced that as well. So we generally, for the most part, tell people to opt out of rental guarantees because they like having the control over the asset. Another question we get is, oh, can I determine who lives in my property? If you're in a rental guarantee, you can't determine who lives in your property. So if you have a property management or place, and I have that question, can we recommend property managers? Absolutely. If you just hire a property management company, they'll rent out the unit for you. They do all the screening, and then you get to decide who's living in your asset, and then you decide what your increases are, and you can decide if you want to renew a tenancy. So some people like the ability just to have that hands-off approach. But really, we find now with just hiring a property management company and having them manage the asset for you, it truly is a hands-off approach, and then you have full control over what you want to do with the asset. Is there any fees for a property management company? If you opt out of the rental guarantee and you go with a property management company, there are fees for management of the unit. Those fees are usually generally around 9% of the monthly rent. How soon should I get a mortgage if the closing date is November 2024 or January 2025? You can start the process right now. You're not going to get the mortgage, you're just getting pre-approved for the mortgage. So it's something that if you want to, you can start now, or you can look at starting this summer. Do you have any suggestions on how to make sure a tenant will leave after paying them? After paying them. Do you have any suggestions on how to make sure a tenant will leave after paying them? I think you mean if I'm giving notice to so I'll answer this because Alberta landlord tenant board, 2 to 3 weeks the tenant's out. So if it's something where the lease has been no longer renewed and the tenant hasn't left, then you just bring it to the landlord tenant board. Your property manager will assist you with that, and the tenant will then be removed from the property. But you don't need to pay the tenant to leave in Alberta. You're just dealing with fixed term leases. how strong is the rental market? As many of these buildings will be Ontario buyers and renting, likely that 7% of the building will be up for rent at this the same closing date. They do tiered closing in the building. So not 100% of the building is closing at the same time. They do tier that out. So you're not going to have all the units on the rental market at the same time. It is spaced out, but there will be a period of absorption that could take 2 to 3 months where your property will be empty. That is realistic to expect. So something to budget in if you're opting out of the rental guarantee. But again, you control what you want to do with the asset at that point, which we find generally most people want to control it when we're discussing that with them. So if anyone has more questions, we're happy to answer them. We've got an hour and 15 minutes now. I still see more questions coming in. You can just email us. If you got the link to this webinar, then you have our emails. We're happy to have these questions answered for you. Erin, thank you so much for coming online. In our recap email, we've recorded this. This will go to everyone. You'll have Erin's contact details on there. So if you choose to go with Erin for your representation on your closing, you can reach out for her. Remember, time is your enemy. So the sooner you reach out to her for closing, the better you are. Do not reach out to Erin 2 days before closing, because Erin, will you be able to help them?
I can try, but probably
She
not.
can try. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she can try to help you. She obviously works for you, with you. But again, the more notice you give everyone, the better. It'll make your life much easier, and everyone that's working with you easier. And then you will be prosperous in your real estate investing life. Nish, Kyle, anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
One very quick thing that we will include in our wrap-up email, which I also dropped in the chat. For those that have bought properties through Truman, they have a construction update progress site. So always stay up to date on that, because it will help you plan your mortgage. If you see movement in that scale of construction, definitely want to start getting the mortgage approval process up and going. But we will, again, include that in your wrap-up email. The address is on your contract as well, but it can be buried. So we will make sure that you have that in hand to be prepared.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, everyone. This has all been recorded, and you'll get a recap, I'd say, within the next 24 hours or so. Okay, thank you so much, Erin. Again, thank you for taking that time. I think you made everyone's life a lot easier with this, and help answer a lot of questions for people. Okay, thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care, guys.
Thanks.
Everyone, take care.
Ciao.